My son put me in the hospital, then he cleaned out everything I had, and when I came home, I had to prove to a stranger at the bank counter that I was still his mother. My name is Ruth. I'm 73 years old. I live in a small bungalow in Kitchener, Ontario, a house I've owned outright since 2009, the year my husband passed, and I used part of his life insurance to pay off the remaining mortgage. I did that deliberately. I wanted something that was mine, something no one could take. I was wrong to think that was enough. I worked for 31 years as a registered nurse at Grand River Hospital. I retired at 66, not because I had to, but because my knees told me it was time. I have a defined benefit pension through the Ontario Nurses Association, direct deposited every month into my TD account. I also receive CPP and OAS. Together it's enough, more than enough for one person in a paid-off house who doesn't need much. My son is named Daniel. He's 44. He lives in Mississauga with his wife Carla and their 2 children. For most of his life, I thought I had done something right with him. He called every Sunday, he came for Christmas. He helped me carry groceries when his back wasn't bothering him. I bragged about him to my neighbors. I told my friend Margaret at church that Daniel was one of the good ones. I want you to remember that. I want you to hold that image of him, because it's going to be important later when everything shifts. It started in January. The winter had been bad, ice everywhere, and I had been careful, the way you are when you pass 70 and you know exactly what a broken hip means. But I wasn't careful enough. I was coming back from my mailbox, maybe 6 steps from my front door, and I went down, fast, the way falls happen, no warning, no time to brace. My left hip took the impact. I knew immediately it was bad. My neighbor, a retired school teacher named Evelyn, saw me from her window and called 911 before I could even get my phone out of my coat pocket. The paramedics came. Grand River admitted me within 2 hours. The fracture was significant. I needed surgery, then physiotherapy, then more time before I could manage stairs safely. I was in hospital for 11 days. Then I transferred to a rehabilitation facility in Waterloo for another 3 weeks. I called Daniel from the hospital the night of my fall. He drove down from Mississauga the next morning, sat with me while I was still foggy from the anesthetic, held my hand. He looked worried in the way that sons look worried. His eyes were red. I told him not to make a fuss. He said he wasn't going anywhere. On my 4th day in hospital, he came to me with a folder. He said he'd spoken to a discharge planner who told him that sometimes, when older patients have extended recoveries, it was wise to have someone managing their finances temporarily, so bills didn't fall behind, automatic payments didn't fail, that sort of thing. He said he'd looked into it and that the simplest thing would be for me to sign a document giving him power of attorney over my financial accounts while I was incapacitated. I asked him if that was necessary. He said it was just a precaution. He said I could revoke it the moment I was home and settled. He had the paperwork already printed. I was 4 days post-surgery. I was on pain medication. I trusted him completely. I signed. I want to be very clear about something, because I've since spoken to a lawyer and I understand now what I didn't understand then. A power of attorney in Ontario is a serious legal document. It grants real authority. It doesn't expire when the crisis ends. It continues until it's revoked or until certain legal conditions are met. I signed it without independent legal advice. I signed it because he was my son and he was standing in front of me with red eyes and I had no reason in the world not to trust him. He visited me twice more during my hospital stay. He visited me once at the rehabilitation facility. He brought flowers, that second time, yellow tulips, and he told me he had taken care of everything at the house, that the utilities were all fine, that I had nothing to worry about. He looked me in the eyes when he said it. I came home on a Tuesday in late February. Evelyn picked me up because Daniel said he had a work obligation he couldn't move. I thanked her and told her she didn't have to wait. I stood in my front hallway with my walker and I looked around my house and something felt immediately wrong, though I couldn't name it yet. It took me until the next morning. The painting above the fireplace was gone. It wasn't valuable in any commercial sense. A watercolor my husband's mother had done decades ago, but it had hung in that spot for 20 years. The wall was lighter where it had been. I walked through the house more slowly after that. The good china was gone from the cabinet in the dining room. 2 of the silver candlesticks my mother had left me. A cedar box from my bedroom dresser where I kept my late husband's watch and my grandmother's rings. I sat down on the edge of my bed and I felt very still inside, the kind of still that isn't peace. I called Daniel, he didn't answer. I left a message. I called again that afternoon. He picked up on the fourth ring and sounded distracted, like I'd interrupted something. I told him things were missing from my house. He said I was probably confused from the medication, that things were probably just moved when he came to check on the house, that I should rest and not worry myself. He said I should rest. I am a retired nurse. I have been managing my own mind and body for 73 years. I was not confused. I called my bank the next morning. I asked to check my account balances. The woman on the phone was polite and careful. She read me the numbers. My checking account had $412 in it. My savings account had been closed. I asked her to repeat that. She said the savings account had been closed on February 3rd. That was while I was still in the rehabilitation facility. The fund $61,240 had been transferred out. I sat very quietly at my kitchen table for a long time after I hung up. $61,000. I had spent decades building that. Careful, deliberate decades. Nursing overtime shifts, skipped vacations, small choices made year after year. That money was my security. It was the cushion between me and the kind of fear I had watched other patients carry into the hospital when they didn't know how they'd afford their care. I called my financial advisor at the bank branch and asked for an appointment that same afternoon. I took a taxi because I wasn't driving yet. I brought my identification, my account statements, and the copy of the power of attorney document I had kept. The advisor, a young woman named Priya, was professional and kind. She pulled up the full transaction history. On February 3rd, Daniel had walked into the branch in Mississauga, presented the power of attorney, and requested a full transfer of the savings account funds to an account in his name. The branch had processed it. It was, technically, within the authority the document granted him. She asked me if I had authorized the transaction. I told her I had not. I told her I had signed the power of attorney to cover routine bills while I was recovering, not to empty my savings account. She told me I needed to speak with the bank's fraud department and also strongly recommended I contact the police. I drove home in a taxi and sat in my kitchen until it was dark. I want to tell you what that feels like. That specific type of quiet. When the person who did something terrible to you is someone you love. When you are sitting with evidence in your hands and you are simultaneously certain and unable to fully believe it. When you can remember holding that person as a baby. When you can remember teaching them to ride a bike in this very driveway. When you have said out loud to other people, he's one of the good ones. That is a grief that has no clean name. I called Margaret, not because I wanted sympathy, but because I needed to say it out loud to someone who knew us both. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Ruth, you need a lawyer before you do anything else." She was right. I called a family law and estate lawyer in Kitchener the next morning. Her name was Patricia Chen. She had an opening that Thursday. I took it. Patricia was direct in the way I needed. She told me that what Daniel had done using the power of attorney to transfer funds for his own benefit was a breach of fiduciary duty and constituted fraud under the Criminal Code of Canada. She said the power of attorney gave him authority to manage my finances on my behalf, not to take my money for himself. She said we should file a police report immediately and simultaneously send a formal demand letter to Daniel and Carla for the return of the funds. She also told me something I hadn't considered. Under Ontario's Substitute Decisions Act, a person acting under power of attorney has a legal obligation to keep records of all transactions and to act in the grantor's best interest. If Daniel had taken items from my home as well, that was additional theft. I filed a police report that same day. The officer who took my statement was thorough and did not make me feel foolish, which I had been afraid of. He said he would refer the case to the Financial Crimes Unit. I also revoked the power of attorney in writing, immediately, and Patricia sent it registered mail to Daniel that same afternoon. Daniel called me that night. I don't know if he had received the revocation letter yet or if he had somehow heard through another channel, but he called, and when I answered, he didn't start with an apology. He started with an explanation. He said he had debt I didn't know about. He and Carla had overextended during the pandemic, a business venture that failed, credit lines that had compounded. He said he had been planning to pay me back. He said he hadn't known what else to do. He said Carla had pushed for it, which I noticed he said carefully, as though distributing responsibility might help. I listened to all of it. I let him finish. And then I said, Daniel, you had a legal document that gave you access to my account. You used it to take $61,000 while I was lying in a hospital bed recovering from surgery. You also removed property from my home. I have filed a police report and I have a lawyer. I'm not calling to negotiate. I'm calling to tell you that I know. He started to say something. I hung up. I want to be honest with you. I did not feel powerful in that moment. I felt old and tired and enormously sad. I cried in my kitchen for about 20 minutes. Then I made myself a cup of tea and I called Evelyn and asked if she wanted to come over. And she did. And we sat together until almost midnight, and she didn't try to fill the silence with advice. She just stayed, and that meant more than I can say. The investigation took 4 months. Patricia kept me informed throughout. The Financial Crimes Unit obtained Daniel's bank records. The $61,000 had been partially used, some to pay personal debt, some on what appeared to be renovations to their home in Mississauga. Approximately $19,000 remained in a joint account. The items from my house were recovered during a police visit to his property. My late husband's watch, my grandmother's rings, the painting. Some of the china, though not all of it. Daniel was charged with fraud, over $5,000, and theft, over $5,000. He retained a criminal lawyer. In October, he entered a guilty plea to the fraud charge in exchange for the theft charge being withdrawn. At sentencing, Patricia attended with me. Daniel's lawyer presented materials about his financial circumstances, his family, his otherwise clean record. I provided a victim impact statement. I want to tell you what I wrote in it, because I chose my words carefully. I wrote, I am not only grieving money, I am grieving the version of my son I believed existed. I am 73 years old. I built my savings over decades of night shifts and difficult work, because I did not want to be a burden to anyone, including him. He used my trust and my incapacity to take that from me. The harm is not only financial, it is the knowledge that I cannot go back to not knowing what he is capable of. That is permanent. The judge sentenced Daniel to 18 months of probation, mandatory repayment of the full $61,000 through a civil judgment which Patricia had arranged concurrently, and 200 hours of community service. He did not receive a custodial sentence. His lawyer had argued successfully that jail time would harm his children, who were innocent. I will be honest with you about the sentence. I had hoped for more, not out of cruelty, but because 18 months of probation for stealing $61,000 from your mother in a hospital bed feels, in your body, like it doesn't balance. The judge was measured and thoughtful, and I don't doubt she weighed it carefully. But I sat in that courtroom, and the number didn't feel like justice yet. What did feel like something was the civil judgment. He must repay me in full. Patricia ensured there was a proper repayment schedule with real enforcement mechanisms. If he defaults, there are consequences. It's not the same as having my money back today, but it's a legal obligation that follows him. It's been 7 months since the sentencing. I have received 3 payments. The rest is coming. My neighbor Evelyn comes for tea every Thursday. Margaret still calls on Sundays, the way Daniel used to. My physiotherapy is finished, and I walk without the walker now. Just a cane when the weather is cold and my hip protests. I have changed some things. Patricia helped me establish a formal personal directive and a revised power of attorney, one with proper safeguards, a professional trustee option, and clearly documented limits. I have spoken to my bank about flagging unusual transaction requests. I have written down in a document that Evelyn and Patricia both have copies of exactly what I want done and by whom if I am ever incapacitated again. I did not do any of that before January. I thought trust was enough. I thought that if you raise someone carefully and love them honestly, that was sufficient protection. I know better now. Here is what I want to say to you. If you are older and watching this, and I know many of you are, do not wait until something happens to make a plan. A power of attorney is not a formality. It is real legal authority over your real life. Never sign one without independent legal advice, no matter who is asking and no matter how much you trust them. Make sure a person you trust has copies of your important documents. Know your account balances. Check them, not because you are suspicious, but because they are yours. And if something does happen, if someone you love does something that breaks you open, I want you to know that you can survive it. You will not feel strong right away. You will cry in your kitchen at 73 years old, and that is allowed. But you can pick up the phone, you can call a lawyer, you can file a report. You can sit across from a stranger at the bank and say clearly and calmly, something is wrong and I need help. You are allowed to fight for yourself. You are allowed to be believed. I am still here. I still live in my house. My husband's watch is back on the dresser where it belongs. The watercolor is back above the fireplace. And every morning when I walk past it, I think about my grandmother and my husband and the 31 years I spent on my feet at that hospital. And I think no one gets to take that from me. Not even someone I love that much. Not anymore.